Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished entrepreneur from Singapore, Mr. Vikram Bharati. Vikram, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on your show.
Thank you. Vikram is the founder of Draper Start-up House, and he and his organization is on a mission to help build 1 million new businesses worldwide by 2030. So Vikram, before we speak about Draper, tell me about your own journey that took you from banking to backpacking across South America to Singapore.
Sure. So I was born in India, in the Northeast, in the state of Nagaland, in the capital, Kohima. So my mother is from there. My father is from Rajasthan, and he was in the civil services, the Indian Administrative Services, and he was posted in the Northeast, and that's where he met my mother. That's where I was born. And when I was being raised in that part of the world, it was a tumultuous time because that part of the world had a lot of civil unrest.
Correct.
And so I grew up in a very turmoiled environment, which in hindsight was very good for my life. Good lessons to be learned there. And I specifically remember my father used to bring home after work, once in a while, he'd bring back these National Geographic magazines. These were these yellow magazines. And, I used to love these magazines. I used to read them cover to cover. 10 times I would read each magazine. And this was before the internet, and so everything was slow. You'd get them in the mail, and I would always be looking forward to the next edition. And that sparked in me as a child this sense of adventure. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to go to every single country in the world. I wanted to go to all the adventurous places in the world. And so that sparked this desire to see the world. And I think because of that initial desire to see the world, the universe gave me the opportunity to go and travel and see the world. It's sort of self-manifested in that way. I mean, it was such a strong desire I had as a child to do that. And so life happened, and I ended up moving to the United States. And I had an Indian passport, which was a very difficult passport to travel the world with. And so unfortunately, my world travel journeys didn't start until I was much later in my life, when I was older, and I became a naturalized U.S. citizen, and I got a U.S. passport. And the first thing I wanted to do was go backpacking, because that was my childhood dream.
Wow.
And so, but by that time, when I had this opportunity, I had been 10 years in banking. I worked at JP Morgan. I had gone to business school. So I had a successful professional career, but as soon as I got that U.S. passport, I hopped on a plane to South America and just wanted to live an adventurous life. And so that's how my travel journey started.
How amazing. How amazing. So let's come to now Draper Start-up House. Tell me about this venture, and what was your motivation to start it?
Yes. So I wanted to marry all the things that I liked in life and things that gave me happiness. And I wanted to put together into an endeavor that I could dedicate my life to. And so certainly I liked the idea of travel. I think I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to travel to 60, 70 countries around the world. And I feel every single person in the world should have that opportunity to travel the world. So that was one passion of mine. Secondly, I love hospitality. When I was backpacking, I was consumed myself in these backpacking culture, which was just absolutely phenomenal. And thirdly, I like the idea of business building because the thesis is the more businesses there are in the world, the more people interact with each other, trade with each other globally. That's really the recipe for world peace. Correct. Is when people are doing business together. And so I wanted to marry all of these things together into a business. And the other thing I really, really love and enjoy doing, which I currently do, is also investing in companies and learning about new industries and new sectors and new business models. And so these four things I wanted to marry together into a business. And so when I was backpacking around the world, in the back of my head, I had this idea that tourism has not been changed in a very long time. It is still the same. You go to a city and you go to the city, the city walks, you go to the pub crawls, you go to the food markets, and this is all fantastic. But I felt like there could be a new category created in tourism, which I felt would be something along the lines of entrepreneurship tourism or startup tourism, where people travel the world and get exposed to different businesses around the world, especially when they're young. And so that sort of sparked the idea to say, how do I start that? How do I build that? And, one thing led to another, and we got started in 2018.
And, when I was reading about you, there's also a mention of a tribe theory. I'm assuming this is what you were referring to as a part of hospitality, but do tell me what is behind tribe theory and how does it work?
Yes, that's right. So my general thesis was we should build a new concept and take the backpacker hostel concept. And so I had spent 2 years backpacking through all of these amazing backpacking spaces around the world. And I felt that we could recreate that concept, but turn these spaces into startup houses where you would do your normal backpacking activities, but you would have an environment where if you have an idea, you could actually turn it into a business. And so tribe theory was this idea come to life where we started a few backpacking hostels that were all startup houses. So we had the entire business building ecosystem inside these spaces through mentorships, through just awareness of how people can build businesses, investments, the entire business building ecosystem we put into these spaces. And so as people were traveling around in these spaces, they realized that, oh, I have this idea and maybe, I can turn it into a business. So that was the original version of that called tribe theory.
And when you encourage, say, startup or startup founders to come and stay with you at your Draper Startup House, what is the kind of support you give to them?
Yeah. So we have 4 pillars to our business. The first pillar is the physical space. So that's a means to get people together into one place. The second pillar is education. So we have a lot of educational programs that we conduct all around the world in different shapes and sizes and different forms and lengths. And so education is a big component of what is available to our community members. The third thing is investments. And so we have our own fund and we have a network of other funds, and we invest in, the ideas that we think are very promising. And the fourth thing is just general business building services. So things like product development, building a proof of concept. And so these product development services is something that we are able to also provide. So, and then there's certainly, mentorships. We have a massive pool of mentors around the world that are able to help anyone with an idea, as well as we have the global networks. So if you're on our Slack channel, you can talk to startup founders and investors all around the world. And so all of these things are infused into a space which is very helpful for business building.
And for my viewers and listeners, Vikram, give me one or two examples of some of the successes you've had emerging out of the Draper Startup House.
Well, we have many successes.
Uh-huh.
Our vision is, or our mission is, to really help build 1 million new businesses in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's our sort of KPI.
Correct.
And we monitor that very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment, we are at about 40,000 businesses that we have helped create in the world. So we're sort of at 4% of our goal. So we have a very long ways to go.
Yeah.
But I would say some key successes that we have seen have actually come from Bangalore. So we have a startup house in Bangalore, and teams they're built, they recruit their team members at the space. And one of the companies that was recently built, we actually invested in, is a fintech company that came out of Draper Startup House, which has now been invested in by a lot of well-known investors. And so, they're going to make a public announcement very soon, which I'm sure you'll hear about.
Yeah.
But I would say that, we're at about 40,000 businesses. Amazing. So it's a lot of great successes.
Fantastic. And Vikram, what goes into being selected? And I'm using the term very carefully, selected for an entry into Draper Startup House.
So this is the beauty of the concept. We are an open platform where anyone can come in, and anyone can come and become a community member. There's no barriers at all to coming into the platform and becoming a community member. So, but in terms, we have lots of programs where we look for different sets of people and characteristics for them to go into specific programs. So we're running programs in Argentina and in Chile. Those have certain requirements. We run programs in California those have certain criteria. We run programs in Austin. Yeah, and so we're running these programs which have unique selection criteria. But generally, you can go to any Draper Startup House location, book a place to stay or a place to work, and go and become a member. It's an open platform.
Wow. Okay. So moving on, with 40,000 entrepreneurs supported and so many more to come, you are an amazing, knowledge bank of startups. So I'm going to ask the next few questions to you are about startups and startup founders. In your opinion, what are some of the important qualities a startup founder should have?
Yeah, so I'm in no position to give any advice but as you said rightly, we do see a lot of characteristics. Correct. And I like to usually look at myself and say, okay, what has helped me so far in my journey? And so certainly I think the number one thing is having the right mindset. I think that is the most important thing. Yeah. Certainly you need skill sets that support that, but the number one thing that I think differentiates someone who has decided to go build a business versus someone who has not is really a mindset. Correct. And I think this, mindset is a very generic term, I suppose. But I think there's generally like two parts of the mindset that I like to look at when we're investing in companies. One is I'm kind of obsessed with this idea of spherical thinking, which we're normally taught to think linearly. Generally in life, where we look at linear ways of solving problems or thinking. But the idea of spherical thinking is something that I'm very intrigued by. And I think it's a term that comes from physics, where every point on a sphere is the beginning and an end. Right. And so, which means the problem set or the solution set is infinite. Every point there could be so many different ways to do things. So I think the spherical thinking is a very intriguing idea that I am trying to wrap my head around. But also I like the idea of when we meet founders who have ideas, I like to see how original are they, because it's very easy to be in the gray zone in everyday lives. It's easy to fall into the gray zone. But I think we like to observe, okay, who has originality of not only ideas, but originality of thinking, originality of personality. And so we feel that originality is a very important trait in building something meaningful, something larger than life, and something that can be very impactful.
Fascinating. And from the other perspective, I'd also get to hear from you, what, in your opinion, are some of the basic mistakes a lot of startup entrepreneurs make?
Yeah, I think the first and most prominent mistake people make is they don't get started. There's a lot of, I think everyone has an idea to do something, to build something, and most people don't get started.
Correct.
And so I think that's a very, very first basic mistake that people make. But I think once you get started in the journey, what we have seen is that the most important place to get into in the business building process is to find product market fit, where you have found a service or a product that people want, that you can sell to people.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies run out of energy before they find that product market fit. And so generally, I think, the most important resource that someone has in building a business is their self-energy, their energy to keep on going despite all the challenges. And people are, I see that in myself. It's very easy to run out of energy because when things don't work, consistently don't work, and you're always trying to find ways to make things work, you have to keep your self-energy going. And I think a lot of times it's very easy to run out of steam. And if it's a journey that's not enjoyable, then it's even more easy to run out of steam. And running out of steam then leads to running out of cash, which then you don't find, you don't get to the point where you find product market fit. So I think running out of energy is something that I've seen as one of the key things that happen, which leads to companies not working out.
Amazing. Two more questions on startup, and then one last question. My next question to you, Vikram, is that there is often a huge debate on funding. My question to you is, should a founder bootstrap as long as possible, or should they take money whenever it's available?
Well, I think if the money is available, I think you should take it.
Okay.
You should not necessarily have to spend it, but I think it's always good to have money when you're building a business. So, of course, it has to be the right types of capital, and from the right people, etc.
Correct.
Yes, if money is there, I think you should take it. You should not necessarily spend it, but it's always good to have cash on the balance sheet for when you do need it. Generally, I mean, it's a tough question because the conventional wisdom is you should bootstrap your business, and make customers the source of funding. Customers should pay you to build your business, which is, I think, the best way to build a business. But I think it really depends on what type of business you're building. Some businesses, you can find cash flows from day one, right? Some businesses, and this is generally in tech businesses that are solving, problems where there's a lot of R&D and development in the beginning. For that, you do need capital to develop products and services that have a very long path until customers can actually touch and buy it. And so for that, it is difficult to bootstrap those companies. So I think the answer is it depends on what types of businesses you're building, what part of the world you're in, what's the situation. So I don't think there's one right answer, but generally you should try to have customers pay and fund your business.
Well said. Time for two more questions. The other question that a lot of founders have asked me, and I'm going to ask you the same question, is when should a startup start to scale up?
Well, I think the first thing is you need to have the right business model where you have found a product market fit, where customers want to buy your product or service. And I think once you found that business model to a certain extent where you see, okay, this is working, people want, there's a market for this, people are willing to pay for something, and that business model is working, then I think it's time to scale up. And the scale up process can be done in phases, certainly. But certainly we see a lot of startups who scale up before they find the business model, before they find the product market fit. And so, a lot of capital goes into customer acquisition, into marketing. There's a high cost of customer acquisition. And so maybe they're scaling up prematurely. So I think I think also the answer sort of like depends, but generally, once you have a solid business model and a product market fit, I think that's the time to scale up.
Well said. Thank you. Great response. And Vikram, my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey, I mean, senior banker, backpacking in South America, because that's where your dream wanted to take it, and now becoming like, a beacon of light for a lot of startup founders. What would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your own journey and from our conversation?
Unfortunately, most of us don't start on the same starting line. I think the world is such a place where the starting line is different for everybody.
Yeah.
And when I look at my journey so far, I have been so blessed and so fortunate that I had the right circumstances and the right situations in life where I felt I had an advantage to progress, to do the things that I wanted. And not everyone has that ability and that chance. And so, I like, for instance, when I started traveling the world, I was a working professional, much later in my life, traveling with people who are much younger than me. They were generally, the backpacking culture is done in your early 20s or whatnot. And I was a decade older than them. And I felt like I had this 10-year late starting point in life because of my, circumstances in life.
Correct.
And I think in situations like that, which all of us go through, I think it's very easy to feel that there's something wrong with you. I think it's very easy to feel that you're not good enough. And the reality is all of us are equal and all of us are good enough for whatever it is that we want to do. And so, if anyone's listening to this and they feel that they are not good enough because their starting point in life is different from what they see, in the world, I think they should think of me because I had a very late starting point. And I used to feel that I'm not good enough, that there's something wrong with me. Why is someone else able to have these opportunities and not me? But you find your way around it. And the truth is we are all equal and we're all good enough to achieve whatever it is that we want to do. We just have different starting points, but that should not bring us down.
Amazing. And on that note, Vikram, and with your very, very powerful comment of all are equal and all are good enough, because everyone gets a different start at different points in our lives, depending on our circumstances. Thank you so much for talking to me about your own journey, about Draper Startup House. Thank you for talking to me about your 4 pillars of physical space, education, investment, and the business building services. Thank you also for speaking to me about startups, startup entrepreneurs, their qualities, mistakes they make, funding, scaling up. And of course, thank you for telling me about your own passion of the National Geographic magazine and how that seemed to have been a motivator and a guiding light for you to do so many different things. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.